Hi, third grade students. I miss you so much. I'm going to read a book to you today called George Washington's Teeth. I am recording this after a lot of time outside. I got to spend today outside, so that's why I'm wearing a hat. Keep the sun off my face. Today when we read George Washington's Teeth, I want you to know that this is a story that's based on something that actually happened. George Washington was a real person, and he did really have issues with his teeth. So this week when we do a little bit of focus on nonfiction text, we're talking about stories that are true, that they're not fake nonfiction. So here we go. All of his life, George Washington had problems with his teeth and worked hard to save them. This story is based on what really happened to George and his teeth. The Revolutionary War, can you see that? There we go. The Revolutionary War, George hoped would soon be won, but another battle with his teeth had only just begun. George Washington rushed into town. The dentist heard his shout. "Hold still," he said, then gave a yank. A rotten tooth popped out. All that night, George tossed and moaned. Another tooth was sore. But at the dawn, he saddled up and galloped off to war. George reached New York as British ships invaded every port. Preparing for a fierce attack, his soldiers built a fort. Inside, he rubbed his swollen gums with soothing oil of myrrh until a sentinel cried out, "Here comes the British, sir!" Charging on the field, George thought, "There's something in my mouth!" He spat into his handkerchief. Another tooth came out. "This can't be happening," George gasped. "What if someone should see? If word got out I'm losing teeth, my men would laugh at me." While no one looked, he wrote a note his dentist would receive. "Please come," it said. "I'll need your help when I get home on leave." Back at home, George lost more teeth till he had only 10. "Oh, Martha dear," George cried, "I fear I'll never eat again." She fed him mush and pickled tripe, but when guests came to dine, he sneaked one of his favorite nuts. Then he only had 9. Man, this guy's losing teeth left and right. George crossed the icy Delaware with 9 teeth in his mouth. In that cold and pitchy dark, 2 more teeth came out. Snow fell on George at Valley Forge. His blue coat hung in tatters, but then he'd only 7 teeth. By then he'd only 7 teeth that couldn't even chatter. Yet bravely George led forth his men, coat and pigtail flying. While cannons boomed, he held his jaw and groaned, "I think I'm dying." The redcoats fled. George won the war when he returned alive. Martha checked for 7 teeth, but only counted 5. He hid the evening of her ball, ashamed his friends would see. That night the dentist came again. George lost another 3. Poor George had 2 teeth in his mouth. The day the votes came in, the people had a president, but one afraid to grin. A portrait artist came to George. He said, "I know a trick. I'll pad your mouth with cotton balls to puff your sunken lips." George stood up to have a look. He fell back on his fanny. "It doesn't look like me," he roared. "It looks like Martha's granny." He yanked the cotton from his mouth, then gasped, "What have I done?" The cotton held a rotten tooth. Now George only had one. George still had that tooth the night a knock came at the door. "I've brought false teeth," the dentist called. "Teeth that won't get sore." George put them in, but when he smiled, springs snapped against his tongue. Out flew those teeth. "Ugh!" George shrieked. "They've knocked out my last one." "Oh no," George moaned. "I'm toothless." He kept his mouth shut tight. He couldn't sleep. He paced the floor and prayed with all his might. "If only I had teeth," thought George. He pondered what to do. "Aha!" he cried. "All my old teeth might help making something new." What do you think he's going to do? He searched Mount Vernon's bed chambers, the pantry, parlors, halls, through shelves, desk drawers, and the musty floor of every horse's stall. What's he searching for? George found no teeth. Alas, they're gone. A great sob shook his shoulders. Through tears, he peered in one last chest, leaped up and yelled, "My molars!" Those are the ones at the very back of your mouth. Those are your molars. With plaster and those teeth he found, George poured a sample mold that showed the dentist how to make false teeth George hoped would hold. The dentist took strong hippo tusk and carved a set to size, each tooth secured with screws of gold that lit up George's eyes. Can you guess the story's end? Those new teeth fit just right, and round the ballroom with his friends, George danced all through the night. At the very end of this book, there are some events in his life. This would be called a timeline of his life, starting in 1732, where he was born, and then it goes throughout his life telling about some things in his life, important events, and then at the end we'll tell when he died. I'm not going to take time to tell you all the things that happened in his life, but he was he was our very first president, and he helped America win the Revolutionary War. He was a very influential person of his time, and I hope you enjoyed the reading of George Washington's Teeth. Written by Deborah Chandra and Madeline Kimura. Pictures by Brock